The first time I saw a human set a Varnak warrior on fire and laugh, I understood two things. 1. These weren't the reinforcements we expected. 2. Thank the stars they were on our side. We had been losing, not just battles, but faith. For 19 consecutive engagements, the outcome had been the same: retreat, ruin, and mourning. The Varnak did not take prisoners. They didn't send ultimatums. They didn't talk. They swarmed. They dissolved our outposts in acid, decorated the walls with our fallen, and laid eggs in the cores of our floating cities. Cities that once pulsed with life, music, and sky gardens now throbbed with larvae of Varnak warriors. We weren't just losing territory, we were losing our place in the galaxy. We'd tried everything: high-frequency disruptors, atmospheric distortion nets, antimatter mines. We even tried bribery once, offering them biomatter in exchange for a ceasefire. They spat on it, literally. It hissed and melted before our diplomats could even finish the offer. And then the message came from the Galactic Concord. Help was on the way. I remember the silence in the war chamber after that transmission. Not joy, not hope, just exhaustion. We didn't cheer, we barely reacted. We'd seen help before: specialists, protocol teams, fleet captains with plans that crumbled on first contact. We were bracing for more of the same. What we got was something else entirely. The dropship didn't land. It punched into the jungle like a meteor wrapped in steel. It didn't slow, didn't hover, didn't scan, just screamed through the clouds, shedding heat like a dying star, and carved a smoking trench through the perimeter jungle before coming to a jarring halt. We thought it was a misfire, some Concorde accident, emergency evac, maybe a crash. Then the ramp dropped, and they walked out. I had been sent as the official liaison, fluent in over 200 dialects, cross-sectoral empathy training, 3 diplomatic commendations. I adjusted my ceremonial shoulder band and stepped forward, ready with the formal greeting in Standard Galactic. My mouth went dry before I could even speak. They didn't wear uniforms. Not matching ones, at least. Some wore matte black armor, scratched and dented in 100 places. Others wore sleeveless rigs with weapons strapped across their backs like trophies. One had a painted skull across his helmet. Another had a necklace made of what I later realized were human teeth. His own, removed during a ritual they called boot camp. And leading them was Sergeant Ramirez. Shorter than I expected, broad, square-jawed, a jagged scar dragged down from his temple to his jaw, making one eye seem perpetually narrowed. He was chewing something, some kind of tough resin or food substitute, and spit it out casually onto the dirt as he stepped toward me. He didn't salute, didn't introduce himself, just looked past me at the tree line and said, "So, where's the bug problem?" That was it. No official briefing, no questions about terrain, resources, or tactical projections. He said it like we'd called him to fix a leaky pipe. I tried to regain composure, cleared my throat. The Varnak breached the northern jungle perimeter 47 hours ago. They've already overrun 4 settlements. Civilian losses are incalculable. Local defense systems have collapsed. Our good, he said, cutting me off with a grin, saves us a hike. I stared at him, unsure if I'd misheard. "Sergeant," I pressed, "our casualties are in the thousands. Our cities are—" He clapped me on the back. Hard. I actually stumbled forward a step. His palm was like a concrete slab. "Relax, fish stick," he said. "You've never had Marines handle your pest control before." I blinked at the term. "Fish stick? You," he said, waving a hand vaguely at my species' gill slits and translucent skin. "You're all fish sticks to us. Don't worry, it's affectionate." I tried to speak again, to explain that the enemy they were about to face was unlike anything the Concorde had likely briefed them on. The Varnak weren't just violent. They were organized, evolving. They adapted mid-battle. They learned. Every encounter made them stronger. But Ramirez was already walking away, barking orders to his squad in clipped Terran slang. I looked back at the still smoking dropship. at the strange symbols painted across its hull, at the crew unloading crates of ammunition while laughing and elbowing each other like they were prepping for a party. Something twisted in my gut. These weren't what I'd been trained to expect, and yet, for the first time in months, maybe longer, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel since the war began. Not hope, not exactly, but curiosity. Who were these beings, and what kind of war were they about to fight in our name? The next day I was tasked with escorting the human unit to forward station Elavar. Station was a generous word. It had once been a strategic relay outpost, perched at the edge of the northern jungle with wide sensor sweeps and orbital uplinks. Now it was half-collapsed ruins wrapped in jungle rot. The Varnak had hit it hard 3 nights ago. Half the garrison was dead. The rest weren't speaking much anymore. I tried to explain this during the ride. Terrain density, hive movement patterns, acid range estimates, topography overlays. I had graphs, animated simulations, annotated reports from our fallen scouts. They didn't even glance at the screens. Private Stitch was re-stitching a nasty gash in his own forearm with a portable med tool, humming some oddly cheerful tune that referenced something called Texas. Another, call sign Reaper, sat sharpening a machete that could double as a short sword. His movements were methodical, ritualistic. A kind of calm menace hung over him like a shadow. Ramirez sat cross-legged on a crate, chewing that same gum, studying something printed on actual paper, a wrinkled map, stained and creased, as if holoprojections weren't a thing, as if the most advanced tools of the Concord meant nothing to them. "You don't need tactical data?" I asked, trying not to sound offended. Ramirez looked up from his map and gave me a lopsided smirk. "Sure, tell us where the bugs are. Everything else, we improvise." Improvise. That word felt like a knife against glass. I was raised in a society built on foresight and order. Improvise was what you did when all other systems had failed, not the plan. By the time we reached Elavar, the twin suns were dipping behind the canopy, turning the sky a bruised shade of violet. Bioluminescent spores floated between branches like tiny drifting ghosts. I remember thinking it was beautiful, for a moment, until I realized that was when the Varnak usually started to hunt. Our few surviving troops stood rigid as the humans disembarked. Some stared, others stepped back entirely. Most had never seen a Terran in person. I hadn't either, before yesterday. Their presence felt too big for their bodies, like each of them carried a war inside their chest and didn't bother hiding it. They were loud, heavy. They walked like gravity didn't matter. Their armor clanked, their laughter echoed. We had expected them to start fortifying the perimeter, coordinating patrols, setting up fallback points. Instead, they took off their helmets and threw them into a loose pile near the crates. One Marine, Sykes, opened a ration and started chewing like he hadn't a care in the world. "All right," someone shouted, "who's taking bets? Highest kill count tonight gets my last peanut bar." I blinked. "You're gambling over kills? Better than cards," Sykes said, shrugging. "Besides, keeps us sharp." They began prepping their weapons like it was a campfire hobby. Reaper was whispering to his machete. Yes, whispering, while Private Stitch loaded a launcher nicknamed Thumper. I approached Sykes again. "Do you have a plan of engagement?" He looked at me like I just asked if water was wet. "Plan? Buddy, we're gonna poke the hive and see who screams." That night, I couldn't sleep. The human camp was alive with noise. Metal clanking, laughter, strange music from their datapads, and occasional cries of "Hoorah!" hurled into the canopy as if daring the Varnak to try something. They weren't nervous, they were excited. At some point I started writing in my personal log. The entry's still there, burned into memory. They don't seem sane, and maybe that's what we need. By midnight, the jungle sensors began to spike. 200 life forms, approaching fast. They should have triggered alarm sirens, emergency evacuations. Panic. Instead, Ramirez calmly stood, rolled his shoulders, and pulled down a pair of sleek, visor-mounted night goggles. He didn't speak to me. He didn't speak to anyone, just turned to his squad and said, "All right, boys, let's go introduce ourselves." And like that, they were gone. They didn't shout or chant or even march. They just vanished into the darkness, like they were returning home. For an hour, silence. Then the jungle screamed. Shrieking alien howls, the hiss of fire, echoes of gunfire, controlled, rhythmic. Then laughter, human laughter, and something that sounded suspiciously like heavy Terran rock music, pulsing from a speaker. They came back after 2 hours, covered in black ichor and ash, 3 Varnak carcasses dragged behind them like hunting trophies. Ramirez's shoulder armor hissed with fresh acid burns, smoke curling from the melted plates. He looked at me, his eyes were bright, alert, grinning. "Tell your command," he said, pulling a half-melted ration bar from his belt. "We'll need more ammo. These bugs are squishier than I thought." Behind him, the jungle was still burning, and all I could think was, what exactly have we brought to this planet? They called it Operation Bug Zapper. That was the name. Not Strike Vector Delta, not Hive Breach Protocol 7, just Bug Zapper. It sounded like a bar joke, or maybe the name of a garage band. But when the human said it with those wild grins and casual tone, it somehow fit perfectly. The name sounded stupid, until you saw what they did. The plan, if you could call it that, was suicidal on paper. Infiltrate a Varnak clutch zone under night cover, plant improvised explosives in the egg chambers, and escape before the entire area erupted into carnage. Our tacticians nearly staged a mutiny when they heard it. Every simulation ended in total loss. The humans? They said it sounded like a fun Friday night. I was assigned to comms, monitoring vitals and audio feeds from the command tower. I remember bracing myself emotionally, thinking I'd be listening to their last moments, their heartbeats, final screams. Instead, I heard something else. Ramirez whispering, "Target 1 5 meters out, Twitchy. Reaper, take him." Reaper, low voice, "Target gone." He squelched nice. Seeks, with a grin in his tone, "Room full of eggs here, ready for delivery." Ramirez, light him up. Then the audio flared. Explosions, sharp overlapping bursts of gunfire, cracks of energy discharges. The comms feed trembled with impact shock. The background static pulsing like the jungle itself was recoiling in pain. And then silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy, suffocating silence that follows catastrophe. The vitals monitor went dark. I froze. My hands hovered over the panel. No signals, no movement, no noise. They were gone. We'd lost contact, no comms, no visuals, no beacons. Gone. I tried to radio out, static. I remember slumping in my seat, heart sinking into my stomach. I had watched hundreds of warriors fall, but something about these humans, the madness, the confidence, the sheer defiance, they had made me hope again. And now, that hope had vanished into blackness. 5 minutes passed, then I heard whistling. It came through the backup channel, faint, cheery, some old Terran melody. I looked up from the console, confused, and then, on the perimeter cams, they emerged from the smoke, covered in slime and soot and pieces of things I didn't want to identify. Ramirez had a gash across his forehead, blood mixing with the alien ichor on his face like war paint. Stitch was limping, laughing. Sykes carried what looked like part of a Varnak egg sack over his shoulder like a backpack. Reaper? He had tied a Varnak jawbone to his belt. Ramirez looked at me as they passed the checkpoint, tossed something my way, a chunk of hardened chitin, and said, "Souvenir." I stared. My screen flashed with new data, confirmed thermal collapse of the hive pit, biostructure obliterated, shockwaves consistent with chain detonations. They had destroyed one of the primary spawning chambers, one that we had spent 3 weeks trying to breach, one that had cost us nearly a battalion. They took it down in 3 hours, 0 casualties. I don't remember what I said to them. I think I just watched, mouth open, as Ramirez cracked open a ration bar and sat on a crate like it was any other Tuesday. Later that night, I found myself seated across from Sykes near the fire. The jungle crackled in the distance. Our own soldiers still hadn't spoken to the humans. Most didn't know how to. I had to ask. "Why aren't you afraid of them?" I said. "Of the Varnak?" He poked the fire with a stick and stared into the flames for a while before answering. "You gotta understand, man," he said. "Where we're from, everything tries to kill you. The planet, the weather, the animals, ourselves. You grow up learning to dodge bullets and drink water that might eat through your teeth." He looked up at me with a tired smile. "The bugs? They're just a fresh coat of paint on an old neighborhood." That stuck with me. The Varnak were fighting to consume, to grow, to feed the hive. But the humans? They were fighting because someone had challenged them, and that's a completely different kind of monster. It started with a scream, not from the Varnak, not from the humans, from me, because I was there when the hive struck back. It was supposed to be simple. A supply run, 3 crates of ammunition, 1 case of medical packs, and a replacement comms dish for a scout post in the coastal wetlands. Ramirez's squad had split into fire teams for the week, cycling support across vulnerable routes. I volunteered to accompany this one. Thought I'd earned some field credibility. Thought maybe the worst was behind us. The wetlands were deceptively calm. Mist drifted over dark water. Long vines hung low, swaying like they breathed. Our boots sank slightly with each step in the spongy soil. The air buzzed with insects, and every now and then a ripple in the muck reminded you nothing here was ever still. We were maybe an hour out when the ground exploded. Literally, the Varnak had burrowed beneath the trail. Like sentient landmines, they burst from the earth, covered in sludge, acid sacs already glowing. 2 of our techs were gone in seconds, sprayed, melted. One didn't even scream, just gurgled as his lungs collapsed. I dropped behind a half-buried hauler, ears ringing, limbs trembling. My instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. That's when I saw Private Byrne. He was the youngest in Ramirez's crew. New face, quiet, still smiled when someone offered food. He saw me frozen. He moved without hesitation, shoved me behind the wreck. Took a hit full to the chest, acid searing through his armor and skin like it was paper. He screamed, a sound I still can't unhear, then dropped to the ground, writhing. The Varnak didn't even wait for the body to cool. They dragged him away, ripping into the jungle like a tide, just gone. We barely got a signal out. Static, panic coordinates. I thought we were all gonna die. But what came through the trees was not a rescue squad. It was Ramirez, alone, soaked in sweat, armor scratched and blackened, shotgun slung across his back, and an expression on his face that made my blood run cold. Not anger, not rage, something older. I stammered, tried to explain what happened, how Byrne was taken, how we didn't even have time to... He didn't say a word, didn't blink. He keyed his comms, voice like granite. "Pack up, boys. These bugs want to play nasty. We'll go full Old Testament." What followed was transformation. The humans changed, not physically, not noticeably, but in posture, in silence, in the weight of their presence. The ones who answered the call, Reaper, Sykes, Stitch. They didn't joke this time. No laughter, no bets. Reaper painted a blood-red X across his chest plate. Sykes checked his rifle without a word. Stitch muttered something that sounded like a prayer, or maybe a curse. Ramirez loaded a shell into his shotgun with a loud clack. "Fletcheats," he muttered. "Time to shred something." They didn't march. They hunted. Over the next 72 hours, I followed them through jungle, swamp, cave, and tunnel. They moved like predators. No comms, no chatter. Just signals, gestures, eye contact. They tracked by footprints, blood trails, and according to Reaper, smell. I asked how they could know where the Varnak were hiding. He just tapped his nose and said, "Rot stinks." They didn't just shoot, they ambushed. They didn't just fight, they baited. I watched Ramirez duct tape a grenade to a half-charred Varnak corpse, prop it up with sticks like a grotesque scarecrow, then lie in wait. When the swarm came sniffing, they didn't stand a chance. The worst moment came on the third night. We found the nest, the one they had dragged Burn to. It wasn't a hive, it was a pit. Bones, acid burns, half-eaten corpses, the stench of rot and death so strong it made my inner membranes recoil. Ramirez didn't flinch. He walked into that nest like a surgeon stepping into an operating room. Reaper and Sykes flanked him. No words, no fear, only precision. I stayed at the perimeter. I couldn't look, but I heard it. The blasts, the roars, the crunch of bone under metal boots. And finally, silence. When they emerged, they weren't smiling. Ramirez held something in his gloved hand. Burn's dog tags. They were charred, one corner melted, but still intact. He didn't say a word, no ceremony, no speech. He simply handed them to me. The others followed, covered in black gore, their movements slower, more deliberate. That night, we didn't talk. We sat around the fire, letting the silence say everything. I wrote in my journal, I thought I understood war, but I was wrong. War is tactics and firepower. This was something else. This was a species telling the universe, if you take one of ours, we will unmake you. And I realized something in that moment, something I feel in my bones to this day. Never take a human's fallen, not unless you're prepared to burn for it. We had momentum. That word hadn't meant much for over a year. We used to measure progress in days survived, not ground gained. But now, after the wetlands, something had changed. Not just in the Varnak, in us. They were retreating. Let that sink in. The Varnak, the same species that had wiped out planetary colonies, dissolved fleets in orbit, and laughed acid into the faces of diplomats, were backing off. Swarms thinned, attacks slowed, intel reported disarray. For the first time the hive minds hesitated. Command scrambled to capitalize the target. Zorathel, once the floating jewel of the Eastern Shelf, a city of light, culture, and art suspended on sky plates above the sea. Now, a massive Varnak hattery. Every previous assault had failed catastrophically. 6 attempts, thousands lost. The plan had always been the same: overwhelm with numbers, air superiority, coordinated orbital strikes, tanks, mechs, drones, and each time the hive adapted, responded, and turned us into fertilizer. But when command brought the plan to Ramirez, he waved them off. All we need, he said, is 2 squads and a ride. They thought he was joking. He wasn't. He just wanted airdrop clearance, no heavy support, no airstrikes, just boots, guns, fire. That night I found him standing alone at the edge of the platform, looking out over the dark sea. "You really believe this is possible?" I asked him. He didn't look at me, just kept chewing his gum, jaw moving slow and steady. "There are thousands of them down there." He nodded, then said quietly, "You ever piss off a hornet's nest?" "Yeah," I said slowly. He turned, finally looked at me. "We're the Hornets." At dawn, the dropships screamed in low, no stealth, no pretense. It was a message. We're coming. Try and stop us. The descent was chaos. I was with the Overwatch crew aboard a command skiff, hovering above the city ruins. Below, I saw them hit like meteors, crashing onto Zorathel's outer sky plates in clouds of smoke and shattered metal. Then the doors opened, and hell walked out. Flamethrowers, shotguns, autocannons, 1 Marine callsign stacks. Wore a heavy exofame with a minigun that sounded like a thunder god screaming through a broken amplifier. Every step he took vibrated across the skiff's monitors. The Varnak surged, thousands of them, crawling over platforms, flooding ventilation tunnels. They thought they had numbers. The humans didn't care. They waded in, sector by sector, floor by floor, burning clutch rooms, collapsing tunnel networks. Grenades cleared biochambers, close combat takedowns were brutal. Knees, blades, blunt trauma, no hesitation. I watched from the screens, horrified and awestruck. I saw a Marine get doused in acid. His armor melted off in chunks. He screamed, slammed a med pack onto his side with duct tape, and kept firing. Another ran out of ammo mid-surge. Instead of retreating, he picked up a Varnak's severed limb and beat 2 more drones to death with it. There was no retreat, no fallback, no mercy. And then came the Queen. Massive. Grotesque. She emerged from the city's reactor core like a living cathedral of chitin and muscle. She fled, rising onto a bioskimmer, gurgling orders in subsonic tones that shattered our external mics. She almost made it. Ramirez rode a grappling line from a nearby tower, flew across the sky like a shadow cast by vengeance, and landed on the Queen's hull. I lost visual. All we heard was his breathing in the comms, heavy, controlled, focused. Then the Queen's skimmer exploded. Not fully, just enough. A surgical detonation. The top blew open like a cracked shell. 10 minutes passed. Then he walked out of the smoke, limping, covered in ichor, one eye swollen shut, holding the Queen's antenna in one fist like a hunting trophy. His armor barely held together. His shotgun was gone. But he was alive. "City's clear," he said, coughing blood. We all just stared at the feed. Zorathel was ours again. The Varnak hive mind collapsed in real time. Drones stopped mid-run. Some even dropped. Sensors confirmed. Neural synchronization dropped to under 30%. Scattered, confused, leaderless. It wasn't just a victory, it was domination. And the message it sent echoed far beyond this sector. It said, if you come for humanity, you'd better come with everything you've got. Because if they come back, they won't just fight. They'll erase you. It's been 6 rotations since the siege ended. Zorathel is rebuilding, slowly. The outer sky plates still creak from where the Varnak tunneled too deep. You can't walk through the southern corridors without catching a whiff of scorched bioflesh and melted steel. There are places where the fire burns so hot that even our best scanners get interference. The ground hums there. We call them dead zones. The humans called them hotspots, said it with pride. The Varnak? They haven't come back, not here, not even close. In fact, the last 3 sectors near this quadrant have seen a measurable drop in hive signals. It's not random, it's not strategic, it's fear, and I get it, because if I hadn't seen what I saw, I wouldn't believe it either. The humans didn't leave right away. They stayed for 2 more weeks, helped patch up perimeter walls, repaired our drones with tools made from scrap and, no exaggeration, used chewing gum to fix a failing sensor node. One of them built a tripwire mine from a broken hoverbike battery and an empty ration pack. When our engineers stared at it in confusion, he just shrugged and said, "MacGyver, baby." I asked Ramirez during those quiet days why they fought like that, why they didn't flinch, why they pushed so hard even when it looked like suicide. He was sitting on a supply crate, boots muddy, one eye still swollen from the Queen's acid spray. He didn't answer immediately, just stared at a pile of half-dissembled Varnak chitin, like he was deciding whether to turn it into armor or a souvenir. Then he said, because someone has to, because if we don't hit back twice as hard, they'll think it was okay to hit first. He stood up, stretched, cracked his back like it was just another day and added, "Also, I really hate bugs." The day of departure came without fanfare. They packed fast. Most of them didn't even say goodbye. Reaper flipped us a lazy salute, cigar in one hand, the other dragging a duffel bag that was probably 70% illegal in at least 12 systems. "Try not to die, fish folks," he called out. That was their goodbye. Ramirez paused at the ramp, just for a second. He glanced back over the city, over the smoke trails still curling from the sea vents, and nodded. Didn't wave, didn't speak. Just that nod. And then he was gone. The dropship lifted off with its signature roar, less like an engine, more like the planet itself protesting, and vanished into the clouds. We stood there, a group of soldiers and engineers and survivors, quietly watching the sky. That night, I opened my old journal again, I'd nearly forgotten what it was like to write something without the fear of dying before finishing the sentence. Here's what I wrote. I've studied over 55 sapient species. Civilizations that build cities inside suns. Minds that speak in quantum bursts. Machines that think they're gods. But none of them fight like humans. None of them laugh into the face of death like it's an old drinking buddy. None of them carry war like a second skin. Humans don't fight to conquer, not really. They fight because someone dared. Because someone poked the nest. Because they've lived on a planet where everything wants to kill you and somehow they survived long enough to enjoy it. They weren't born in peace. They were born in challenge. And when war finds them, they don't endure it. They excel at it. They turn battlefields into proving grounds. And if you're lucky enough to be standing next to them when the fire comes, they might just save your life while grinning through the smoke and asking for snacks. So if the Varnak ever come back, if anything comes back, gods, machines, monsters, I know who I'm calling. And I hope to every star in the void that they're still out there, chewing gum, duct taping grenades to corpses and calling it Tuesday. Because if they're not, we're screwed.